What's your plan?
What's the plan, Baptiste?
This is too much killing, yo.
I'm more than happy to die for it. You hear me?
I get that. Trust me. Ruthie!
Joe lives as an avocado farmer, managing a large operation alongside his partner, Estra, in MexiCall. Their farm provides jobs for many locals and supplies produced to the surrounding community, but everything takes a hit when a virus destroys an entire crop, leaving Joe unable to pay his workers. With no other options, he turns to the one skill he's always relied on, fighting. Because Joe isn't just any farmer, he's a former Special Forces soldier, trained in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Hoping to solve his financial problems while still keeping a low profile, he enters an underground fight circuit where even police officers show up to gamble. Every match offers prize money, so Joe commits to fighting again and again until someone finally beats him, with his loyal employee and friend Lopez standing in his corner. In his first fight, Joe's opponent makes a critical mistake by trying to bite him. That only pushes Joe to lock in completely, and he quickly ends the match by choking him out. Watching from the side, Lopez grows concerned, not just as an employee, but as a close friend, worried about how far Joe is willing to go. But Joe is determined. He refuses to stop until he's earned enough money. His second opponent looks intimidating, almost like a professional fighter, but lacks the actual skill to back it up. Joe lands a few precise hits, forcing the man to fake an injury in an attempt to catch him off guard. The trick fails completely, and Joe takes him down without mercy. Still not satisfied, Joe keeps going. His next challenge is a jiu-jitsu specialist, a slippery, technical fighter who nearly gains the advantage multiple times, but Joe's strength and experience prove too much. He powers through, overpowering the grappler and nearly snapping his arm in the process. The next opponent stepping into the ring is introduced as the Bone Crusher, a massive, heavily built fighter. Despite his size, he's surprisingly fast, but Joe's precision and technique quickly expose his weaknesses. Punch after punch lands clean, and before long, Joe drops him hard. The man tries to get back up, but his legs give out beneath him, followed by the rest of his body. With enough winnings to cover 2 months' worth of salaries, Joe decides to stop for the night and leaves with Lopez. Back home, Estra hates seeing him bruised and battered, but Joe can't help enjoying the attention she gives him because of it. Still, she's proud of him. He did what he had to do to keep everything afloat. Joe later returns to the farm to pay his workers. Although things are slowly improving, recovery won't be quick. Lopez suggests they may need to lay people off until things stabilize, but Joe resists the idea. This farm has supported them and their workers for years, and letting people go is the last thing he wants, even if it might become unavoidable. Later on, Joe heads into town with one of his younger workers, Marco. Curious, Marco asks why Joe chose to settle in a place like MexiCall. Joe tries to dodge the question, but Marco quickly reads between the lines, assuming Joe must have done something that prevents him from going back home. After a moment, Joe admits it's true. He explains that working as a soldier for hire sometimes meant fighting on the wrong side of things. Eventually, Estra's father brought him to MexiCall, giving him a chance to start over by training the local self-defense group. Marco is impressed, having heard stories that Joe was nearly unbeatable in combat. Inspired, he says he wants to fight like Joe one day, but Joe shuts that idea down, telling him there's more to life than constantly being in battles. While at the market, Joe stops by a vendor he used to supply and picks up some vegetables, reassuring them that things will improve soon. As they drive away, Marco is furious over what just happened. The image of the woman being killed sticks with him, and he angrily swears that one day he'll learn how to fight and take revenge on all of them. Joe barely gets a chance to respond before things escalate again. Chavez and his crew catch up to them in another truck, clearly not finished with the situation. Joe tries to outrun them, but his vehicle starts failing and they lose control, crashing straight into a tree. Joe is knocked unconscious from the impact, and Marco is dragged out of the wreck. Forced onto his knees in front of Chavez, Marco is terrified. Chavez, offended over what he sees as disrespect, begins asserting his dominance. Marco has no idea who he's dealing with, but Chavez makes it clear. He's the son of the most powerful drug lord in MexiCall, known as the General, and according to him, no one disrespects his name and lives. Ignoring Marco's desperate pleas, Chavez prepares to kill him, but in a split second, Joe regains consciousness. He quickly disarms one of the men and then ruthlessly guns down all 3 attackers. Marco is left shaking, overwhelmed and terrified by what just happened, but Joe stays focused. He knows they can't remain there. He grabs 2 shovels from the back of his truck and calmly tells Marco what they need to do to cover everything up. Together, they bury the bodies in a shallow grave, then torch the vehicle to erase any evidence. Marco is stunned by how efficiently Joe handled everything, but to Joe, there was no choice. It was either survive or die. Afterward, Joe takes Marco home and makes him promise to stay silent about everything they witnessed. He reassures him that things will be okay. Weeks pass, and nothing seems to come from the incident. Life slowly returns to normal, and as the farm begins to recover, Joe gets back into training. Estra grows uneasy seeing him prepare to fight again, but Joe believes it's better to be strong and ready on a farm than caught unprepared in a war. It's a mindset that hints at the storm that's coming. Joe later returns to the farm where he encounters two unfamiliar men. One of them, a sharply dressed individual named Baptiste, approaches him with apparent interest in the property, while the other man, Ruthie, stays silent, simply watching everything. Joe isn't comfortable letting strangers wander through his fields, but he agrees to drive them back to where they came from. As they ride, Baptiste casually talks about farming and agriculture, acting like a curious businessman. But beneath that calm demeanor, he's actually a dangerous underboss working for the general, with Ruthie serving as his enforcer. Once they reach their destination, they thank Joe and leave, but something about the interaction doesn't sit right with him. His instincts kick in immediately. Joe rushes back home in a panic, telling Estra they need to leave right away. He admits that trouble from his past has finally caught up to him. With no time to explain further, he urges her to pack quickly. Seeing the fear in his eyes, Estra doesn't hesitate and begins gathering their things. Joe attempts to call Marco, but he can't reach him. Just then, there's a knock at the door. Hello again. It's Baptiste. This time, he introduces himself as a representative of the Guacomo Corporation, claiming he's interested in buying a large portion of their crops, but it's clear he has other motives. Estra invites him in and offers him food, trying to remain polite. As they sit and talk, Baptiste continues pitching his offer, speaking passionately about agriculture and even offering to pay above market value. Despite his persistence, Estra repeatedly turns him down, explaining they can't make that kind of decision right now. But the mood quickly shifts. Baptiste notices their packed bags and casually asks if they're going somewhere. Estra tells him they're visiting her pregnant sister, but he immediately challenges her. What's her name? It becomes obvious he already knows the truth. He reveals that Estra is the daughter of a soldier who died fighting the cartels and then shifts his focus to Joe. He mentions they couldn't find much information on him, subtly hinting at his mysterious past. Then Baptiste brings up Joe's truck. Even though it's been repainted, he knows it was recently involved in a crash. Joe brushes it off as a farming accident, but Baptiste keeps going, mentioning that a burned-out vehicle was recently discovered nearby, along with a shallow grave containing the son of a powerful crime boss. Through all of this, Joe stays calm. He listens carefully, then subtly signals that the conversation is over, asking if Baptiste has finished eating, making it clear it's time for him to leave. Before leaving, Baptiste tells them to consider his offer and hands over his contact information. As he does, Ruthie steps in and silently locks eyes with Joe, creating a tense moment, but Baptiste signals him to back off, and they both leave. The second they're gone, Joe knows the situation has escalated. He and Estra quickly decide they need to get to Marco immediately, convinced Baptiste has already connected everything. Estra stands firmly by Joe's side, assuring him they'll get through this together. In that moment, seeing her unwavering support, Joe feels the urge to propose, but she gently tells him to wait for the right time. They waste no time packing up and call Lopez to stay behind and watch the house. Then they head straight to Marco's place. When they arrive, Joe tells Estra to keep the engine running while he checks inside, just in case something's wrong. As he approaches the house, a wounded gangster suddenly stumbles out, but Joe reacts instantly, snapping his neck without hesitation. He rushes inside, and is hit with the worst possible sight. Marco is dead, lying lifeless in the tub. For a brief moment, Joe completely breaks. Joe steps back outside and tells Estra the truth about Marco. She's devastated, but Joe knows they don't have time to grieve. The cartel will be hunting them next, so he quickly forms a plan. He tells Estra to drive to the edge of town and wait for him while he creates a distraction and pulls the enemies away from her. She's terrified, but Joe reassures her that he'll find his way back. Reluctantly, she leaves, trusting his word. Joe returns inside the house and looks at Marco one last time. The pain he feels begins to shift, turning into something much darker. Marco had wanted revenge, wanted to wipe them all out, and now Joe vows to fulfill that wish himself. He's done running. He's going to put every single one of them in the ground. At that moment, several cartel members armed with machetes surround the house. Joe doesn't hesitate. He steps outside with a blade of his own and charges straight into them. Fueled by pure rage, he cuts through them one by one. The final attacker proves more skilled, managing to match Joe's strike for strike, but it doesn't last long. Joe overwhelms him and drops him to the ground, but more trucks can be heard approaching in the distance. Knowing he can't stay, Joe escapes before reinforcements arrive. Baptiste and Ruthie quickly arrive with armed men and begin hunting Joe down. Go that way. As the group splits up, Ruthie eventually tracks Joe down and confronts him alone. Calm and emotionless, he tells Joe that by killing Marco, the balance has been restored for Chavez, and now he wants to test just how dangerous Joe really is. Joe admits he may not be at his peak anymore, but he's still far more capable than Ruthie assumes. Ruthie strikes first, launching a powerful kick, but despite his confidence, he can't back it up. Joe quickly gains control of the fight and overpowers him with ease. Before Joe can finish things, Baptiste and the rest of the men arrive. Joe is forced to retreat, but not before Baptiste fires several shots in his direction, one of them hitting Joe. Baptiste then calls for a retreat. Ruthie questions the decision, seeing it as weakness, but Baptiste shuts him down immediately, reminding him that he just lost his fight and has no right to judge anyone. Know your place? Joe manages to make it back to the truck, but he's in terrible condition. The moment Estra sees him, she breaks down in tears, begging him to stay conscious. She tells him she can't lose him, that without him, she's nothing, and pleads for him to hold on. Meanwhile, Baptiste and his crew return to his villa. He gathers his men and tells them they searched for Joe and now believe him to be dead. But once they're gone, his real plan comes out. He intends to keep Joe's survival a secret from the general, and make sure Ruthie is aligned with him on this. Days later, Joe wakes up in a worn-down shack. Estra has been taking care of him the entire time, using whatever food and supplies she can find to help him recover. But the moment he's awake, she delivers devastating news. Baptiste has taken everything, their farm, their home. It's all gone. Joe suggests they leave everything behind and head north to start over, but Estra refuses. She can't accept the idea of her family's legacy being stolen. She makes it clear she's either taking the farm back or destroying it herself, and for that, she needs to be ready. She tells Joe to train her like everything depends on it. Soon after, Joe begins teaching her how to fight, focusing heavily on knife combat. Knowing she'll be up against opponents bigger and stronger than her, he emphasizes precision and technique over brute force. Day by day, she improves, becoming faster, sharper, and more confident. Good. Keep the blade moving. Later, when Joe is alone, he takes a moment to pray. It's been a long time since he's done that, but now he's asking for strength to get through what's coming and to one day make Estra his wife. Estra walks in and interrupts him. Joe is still recovering from his injuries, but he believes this is when he's most dangerous, when he has nothing left to lose. She reminds him this won't be like the fights he's used to, but that's exactly what sparks an idea in his head. Joe tracks down a local fight organizer named Sue, hoping to enter his underground tournament. At first, Sue isn't interested. He doesn't think a foreigner would attract bets since people come to watch locals fight, but Joe insists he can make it worth his while. Sue mocks him and his right-hand man joins in, laughing, but Joe uses that moment to prove himself. When the man tries to push him out, Joe responds instantly, launching him across the room with a powerful kick. That's enough to change Sue's mind. Impressed, he agrees to let Joe compete, but with one condition. He has to fight wearing a mask to blend in. At the fight pit, Joe steps in wearing the mask, with Estra watching closely from the sidelines. She's clearly worried, but Joe reassures her that he'll be fine.
I got this. I promise.
Once the fight begins, Joe faces a capable opponent, but his movements quickly catch Sue's attention, enough to make him place a bet on Joe mid-fight. Joe dominates the match, breaking his opponent down piece by piece before locking him into a chokehold to finish it. This, the farmer. Joe's second match begins shortly after, but everything quickly falls apart. Baptiste and Ruthie suddenly appear at the fight pit, completely disrupting Joe's plan. Without hesitation, Baptiste pulls a gun and kidnaps Estra. As Joe notices Ruthie watching him, he instantly realizes something is wrong. Rage takes over. He annihilates his opponent in brutal fashion and rushes to go after Estra, but he's too late. She's already gone. Joe returns home completely shattered. The guilt hits him hard. He blames himself for letting her get taken. Overwhelmed with anger, he trashes everything in sight, destroying the room in a fit of rage. But once the storm settles, only one thought remains in his mind: kill them all. Knowing he'll need weapons, Joe goes to a local arms dealer to gear up. He gathers what he needs, but when it's time to pay, he comes up short. This isn't $3,000. The dealer refuses to let him return anything and instead decides to kill Joe and take the money for himself, a fatal mistake. In seconds, Joe reacts. He guns down the dealer's men with precision and then finishes the dealer himself with a blade. Even then, he warns him if he tries to come after him, it'll cost him his life. Joe walks away. But the dealer attempts to call for backup. Joe never actually left. He comes back and eliminates him without hesitation. Fully armed, Joe heads straight for the farm, now occupied by Baptiste's men. Moving through the area carefully, he takes out 2 guards who are caught completely off guard and makes his way in through the woods. With no sign of Baptiste, Joe slips into the house and silently takes out the men stationed inside. When Baptiste and Ruthie return, Joe reveals himself and immediately wipes out all of their men, leaving only the 2 of them alive. He demands to know where Estra is. Baptiste assures him she hasn't been harmed, but Joe isn't satisfied. He forces Baptiste to call the general and tell him they've captured his son's killer, demanding he arrive with his men or both of them die. Baptiste makes the call, knowing full well this could cost him everything. The general agrees to come, but makes it clear Baptiste will pay for this betrayal. Baptiste warns Joe that killing the general won't end anything, that he'll be hunted forever. But Joe doesn't care. He's ready to take down anyone who comes after him. He orders Ruthie to bring Estra. When she returns, Estra is unharmed. Baptiste made sure of that. As tensions rise, Ruthie asks what the plan is, but Baptiste already has one. If the general dies, there will be a power vacuum. and he intends to fill it. Suddenly, armed men surround the house. The general's advisor, Santiago, steps forward to negotiate. Joe demands his farm back and wants to explain the truth about what happened to the general's son. He insists the general come inside, but Ruthie ruins the setup, warning Santiago it's a trap. Santiago immediately turns on Baptiste, accusing him of betrayal, but Baptiste kills him on the spot, stabbing him in the neck with a bottle. Now fully committed, Baptiste warns that every cartel member will be coming for them. Despite everything, Joe realizes Baptiste actually maintained the farm well, even fixing the disease that was destroying the crops. In the end, he decides Baptiste isn't his enemy. Not right now. Joe allows him to arm himself. Moments later, the general arrives and demands his son's killer be handed over. Joe steps out to face him, and without hesitation, guns him down. Gunfire erupts instantly. Joe barely makes it back inside as bullets tear through the house. Together, Joe, Baptiste, and Estra grab weapons and fight back, covering each other as they retreat toward the rear. Estra breaks out first, taking down one attacker with a gun and then eliminating another with a blade, catching them completely off guard. Joe and Baptiste continue holding their ground, firing at anyone who moves. Joe eventually runs out of ammo and switches to a machete, coming face to face with the same skilled fighter from earlier. The two clash again, and this time the man lands a hit, but Joe quickly turns it around and kills him. Baptiste is nearly taken out, but Joe steps in just in time to save him. Together, the three of them finish off the remaining attackers until every last gangster is down. Finally, it's over. Joe pulls Estra into an embrace, relieved she's safe. Baptiste shakes Joe's hand before walking away, telling him to take care of himself. And with everything finally behind them, Joe finds the perfect moment and proposes to Estra.